Welcome to Implicating the Real. Today's show is part 2 of the conversation began in the previous episode. Let's get right into it. Hope you enjoy.
So on 93, Seth talks a bit about the process of dreaming and how your dreams relate to your stream of consciousness self. And Seth says that what happens in the final sort of touching up of your dreams that you remember is much more close to your conscious self than most people assume that it is.
Yeah, I remember him saying the kind of the most unfortunate part is the almost censoring part of it at the very end is done almost by your conscious self. There's one last prude that's then really changing it at the end.
Yeah, I'll read the quote. One small point might explain what I mean here. If you do not want to remember a particular dream, you yourself censor the memory on levels quite close to consciousness. Often you can even catch yourself in the act of purposely dropping the memory of a dream. The touching up process occurs almost at this same level, though not quite.
I think you should read the previous paragraph too about touching.
Yeah. In this final version of the dream, right? The version of the dream. In this final version, the basic experience is converted as nearly as possible into physical terms. It is therefore distorted. This final touching up process is not done by deeper layers of the self, however, but is much more nearly a conscious process than you realize. Then it goes on, one small point to explain what I mean here, and then it's the rest of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he was saying that this final process that Joe's talking about often masks intense psychological and psychic experience. And unfortunately, what you usually recall is just this final dream version.
Yeah, I think getting into those two paragraphs he's referring to when you're in a dream, we've been talking about these different levels of selves and stuff that you're kind of deep in there and having this more a cleaner experience or something. And then the part of a lot of what our dreaming is coming from that depth is translating it back into our conscious level. And I think he's referring to some of the very end of that process is sometimes unfortunately purposely goes a little too far to keep ourselves in the dark. We don't want to hear things. They don't align with our beliefs of what reality is. So we're not going to accept them.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you guys, have you had that experience with dreams of intentionally being I'm not going to remember this one, or being oh, this didn't make sense. Maybe I'll remember it this other way that makes a little more sense, you know?
Well, he says that we are supposed to remember all of our dreams, and that at some point, probably when you're dead, you can remember all your dreams. But that humanity, at least this probable version of humanity, believes that we are not supposed to remember our dreams, and so we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I have friends on both spectrums. Friends who are oh, I've only had one dream in the past X years, and it's well, you're high every day, but also you're super repressed, but also you don't believe that you dream.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that Seth says that if you don't believe something is going to happen, you manifest that in your life. I do think he dreams because Seth also says that if you don't dream, you die, because that's how you commune essentially with your greater self. There's no point in you being here if you're detached from your greater self. And then I have friends who remember every single dream. It's crazy. One of my friends, she was surprised to learn that people don't remember their dreams. She's you don't remember every dream? I'm no. I've tried to, I learned about lucid dreaming when I was 15. And since then, I've tried to actively practice dream recall. This is a skill that some of us have to actually put work into. But for her, it's effortless. And I'm just that's incredible. But I think it's just that she was never exposed to the idea that you weren't supposed to remember your dreams, hence her shock in her 20s that people don't do that. I can't say that I've caught myself in a process of forgetting the dream, but I have definitely sat there and been oh shoot, it's leaving, and I'm trying to get as many pieces as I can and write it down but I can feel myself forgetting already.
Yeah.
And there's another thing I wanted to mention, which is that Seth eventually at some point says, dream symbolism is very specific and tailored to you. I think that is essentially what's happening at this final stage of basically compiling your dream as you're translating it into symbols that mean something to you. I think the example, he may or may not have used this example, a dog will mean something to someone who loves dogs and rescues them, but that same dog might mean something different to a person who was attacked as a kid by a dog. They symbolize completely different things. So dream symbol books that claim that dream symbols are universally applicable are just bunk.
Right.
They might be like on to something generally, but yeah, like that's why, does it come out of Seth? But I know a lot of like our Seth adjacent friends and book club people, we tend to use the technique of saying, if that was my dream, I would say it means this, which is just a nice way to contextualize things without violating that idea that symbols are personalized in that way.
I find that helping people interpret their dreams is a lot more effective when you know that person intimately and you know their fears and likes and dislikes. Otherwise,
it's why traditionally you need an analyst, right? Somebody who's gonna like really delve into like getting to know you and be like, you know, when you say this kind of thing, well, you know, what does that usually mean to you?
Yeah, my version of the same thing is like, you know, coming out of this and other things that I've developed the desire to have like a dream journal. So like often I'm waking up, I'm like, oh, I got to remember this. I've caught myself, I don't know if it's like purposely like some dreams are like, they're just like unpleasant or weird. And I noticed like this weird part of myself is like, oh no, I don't want to write this dream down.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you know, like when I fully wake up or I actually think about it, I'm like, I can understand that, but like also like, I don't get it. So like there's part of me that I'm still like probably like training to like be vulnerable or whatever the term would be, to like just feel okay with writing down something that's like weird and like, who cares? It's a dream.
Yeah, no. And like, I was like surprised because I was like thinking about like, is this really true? And I was like thinking about it and I was like, no, I think this actually does happen a lot more consciously than people give it credit for, like from my experience at least. And like, I think part of it is like what you're talking about. Like people talk about dream symbolism being like a way of like defending yourself from yourself, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's much more like emotionally charged if you're sort of like doing it on purpose consciously, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're like, oh, I had this dream and it's like got this really like messed up thing in it. And like, I would be super ashamed to like tell the person who's in the dream, like that I had a dream about them and like this thing happened in the dream. But then you're like, well, I'll just make it so instead of that person, it's like a dog or something, right? And like that whole process of like sort of making it into symbolization that you then need to decode later, you know? And it's like very interesting that that's in this tradition, in the Sethian tradition, is like so close to your person and so close to your consciousness, that all of that work that you can do to decode doesn't actually tell you very much about this higher level entity type thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are so many levels of translation, but I think it's illustrative to think about like how we just like consciously repress things too. Like you can see someone, maybe an easy example is like someone that, you know, just denies their bisexuality or something. Just like, there's a lot of ways where it's easy to see like our society would like train someone to like, no, you're not open to that. That's not true. I'm not accepting that as a valid thought or desire or anything. And like the fact that you're doing that on a very conscious level makes it really easy to believe that you would do it on a slightly less conscious level.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember any like specific dreams that I was just like, no, I don't want to write that down. But it could have been like sexual or like it's too violent or it's not, you know, doesn't fit the idea of myself or what I want to be. You know, it's like, it's just I think it's like a kind of a primitive way of like dealing with that. Like a more mature would be to be like push into it and ask myself questions. Why does it make me feel uncomfortable? Blah, blah, blah. That way you open up to it and then you realize, you know, these thoughts or desires, they're not as scary as I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
What helped me a lot was learning from the dreams course that sometimes entity will send us dreams to make us aware of a fear or limiting belief we have. So that would mean that even if you have a dream that is like highly distasteful and you're like, how could I dream this? It's not necessarily something you want. It might be something that you're deathly afraid of. And this is entity's way of being like, you only have this fear because you have a limiting belief that supports it.
Yeah.
Get rid of that limiting belief and your life will be a lot better.
Yeah. I think the word vulnerability is really a good one in my experience, because I've found that like in my own personal growth, being vulnerable is like the move, where because you're afraid someone's going to judge you or something's going to happen if you do or think something. And then the more you just kind of push into that and safe spaces, the more you realize you have this incredibly kind of joyous feeling. You're like, oh, that wasn't bad at all. And it empowers you. So like I always tell like when my patients at work are struggling with something, like, taking responsibility for your own thoughts and feelings and moving into vulnerability is taking power. Everybody wants power, but nobody wants responsibility. But they kind of go hand in hand. It's just the process of personal growth, I think, has just been that for me. The key is to have like a safe space to do those things, right?
Yeah, right. Because, like you were saying, like so much of sort of how you're tying yourself into knots is gonna be coming from like you feeling unsafe. It's like a self-defense mechanism. Yeah,
if you're a child in a toxic home, you aren't in a safe space to like explore those things because, as soon as you pipe up with something, somebody's gonna
smack you
down. Yeah.
Right.
Coming right off of that, here the basic experience is hastily dressed up as much as possible in physical clothes. This is not because you want to understand the experience, but because you refuse to accept it as basically non-physical. All dreams are not of this nature. Some dreams themselves do take place in psychic or mental areas connected with your daily activities, in which case no dressing up process is necessary. That's the other kind of overwhelming thing about dreams, is just that they, according to Seth, they can come from so many different directions and areas, but
that's yet another reason not to judge them.
Yeah.
Or feel ashamed of them.
Yeah.
I really like this quote at the bottom about dreams, or is it? In this state, you also pursue works and endeavors that may or may not be connected to your interests as you know them. You are learning, studying, playing. You are anything but asleep. As you think of the term, you are highly active, like while you're asleep. And then humorously, you are involved in the underground work, in the real nitty-gritty of existence. I just like that phrase.
I had that one too. Yeah. I like it, just the idea that you are learning, studying, playing. I feel like that's what I'm always trying to do with my waking life, and the idea that other parts of myself would be doing the same thing makes me feel good.
I didn't realize that was a Sethian thing, though, that you had said earlier, that like if you don't dream, like you literally like wouldn't be like alive, like you would die without dreaming. Like that's sort of like the reason, that's like the focus of like why you're here kind of thing.
Well, yeah, because he said that dreaming reality is closer to actual reality than physical reality.
He's saying like you just can't not dream. Like it's synonymous, like being alive and being aware of something that we would call dreams. But just having awareness is basically the same thing as being alive. Does that make sense? Have you ever been one of those people that think like, I tend to think like I'm always dreaming, even if I can't remember them. Like,
oh yeah, no, yeah. I did the dream journaling thing like really deep for like a year or so when I was in college.
Yeah.
And like I took them pretty seriously. Where it was like I remember there was a little bit of time there where it really did feel like you were doing your daily life so you could get back to sleep. So you could like do the dream thing. Like it was the more important part of my life, when I was trying to do that. And it's like, yeah, I think there's a lot of like cool like self-growth you can do by doing that kind of thing. It's just very demanding, psychologically, to just be like, I gotta get done with work so I can go home so I can dream,
I'm trying not to spoil, but the next chapter is about dreams and sleep.
Oh, let's go.
We're getting ahead of ourselves.
We can give some tips and tricks to the audience.
Well, he says right here on the next page, in many ways, when you are awake, you are resting far more than you are in so-called unconscious nightly state. It's just turning a lot of our ideas upside down, I guess. It's just like, at some point he talks about what's chemically happening with the body when you're awake and dreaming, and like they just complement each other in a way. Like one is always like literally rest for the other, like chemically. And that's why he recommends like, experimenting with and challenging our ideas of what an ideal night's sleep schedule is. We covered that already, didn't we? In this book?
That's the next chapter. Spoilers.
Yeah. I did want to comment on the last paragraph you
Yeah.
said, Michael, about you're learning, studying, playing, you are anything but asleep, as you think of the term. He told Jane once, I don't remember which book this was in, but he told Jane, and this is when she was just beginning to accept the idea that we are more than just our bodies. Like, she was still skeptical about it. But he said to Jane that she's one of those people who, at night, it's like her role to guide the recently deceased to basically be reoriented with the beyond.
Yeah.
Basically, to take these like confused, like what just happened, and like tell them like, well, you just died, and this, that, and the other. That was like her role every night, and she's so, and I guess we all are, so divorced from her dream reality that she's, when Seth first came, she was like, do we really have souls? Do we really have spirits, or is this just woo-woo bunk? But when she sleeps, she is the one who tells these people these things, and that kind of thing is really interesting to me because it just makes me really disinclined to judge anybody for what they're like in person, because I'm like, I don't know who you are.
That's a good point.
Because Seth has said like his most recent time is simultaneous, his closest physical life to when Jane and Rob were alive was this person named Frank Butts that he described as a fathead, which back then was slang for someone stupid. So I'm like, well, if you could just meet a quote unquote fathead in person, but in reality he's this incredible entity named Seth, then like, who are the people that I see in everyday life? You know what I mean? Like, I can't judge anyone, because this person who is like a huge skeptic about life after death might be the one leading souls into
the Grim Reaper.
And theoretically, like everyone's connected to like a very intelligent, deep, kind of entity level something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and their human persona might believe completely opposite of what the dream persona or the greater entity believes.
I mean, it just like there's always some like deeper truth in like any cliche, but like there's like that spiritual greeting, or like I agree with the higher being in you. Like if we stop and think about that, that's pretty cool actually.
Oh, if somebody told me that, I'd be like, rude. I'm right here, man.
Too good for this level.
Yeah, don't say anything to the messenger. All right, cool, whatever. No, I started reading, after I got done with this, preparing for this, I had a little time, so I started reading the first couple chapters of the fiction book Jane wrote that you brought me.
I've never read that yet.
Over Soul 7?
Yeah.
Seeing it put in a fictional context makes a lot of that stuff, like, clarify. Like, you can sort of, like, see the differences between, like, the entity and, like, the individual personalities and stuff. Because, like, there's a lot of stuff in there, right, where, like, the entity's like, I feel really bad about this guy. He's such a sourpuss, blah, blah, blah. I wish he'd just lighten up, you know?
Interesting. I still got to dive into that. I was going to say, too, you mentioned about Jane guiding, recently deceased souls or whatever, but I think it's at the end of this book, Seth talks about his own experience doing that. I'm pretty sure it's at the end of this book.
With the person he calls the Arab.
Yeah. But I mean, I think
Seth canceled.
I think he's using Jane's vocabulary at the time.
It was the 70s.
And then, but that's the thing that we probably don't escape when I'm sitting here, like trying to project in the future, like what are we doing now that we won't realize it. A lot of those language things, like they just become negatively connotated, even if like some people aren't using them that way.
I mean, if you get to know his material, he is like the least racist, the least homophobic person ever.
And I'm sure like he was okay using that term because he knew that Jane wasn't probably using it in a negative way either.
I mean, the person may have actually been like an Arab.
Yeah.
Right, like. So there's the you do a lot of work while you're asleep thing. And then in this page, Seth clarifies that, like, here it says, the seeming division is not arbitrary or forced upon you. It is simply caused by your present stage of development, and it does vary. Many people take excursions into other realities, swim, so to speak, through other streams of consciousness as a part of their normal waking lives. Some strange fish pop up in those waters. So it's like, presumably, you don't necessarily also need to do the like back and forth between being awake, being asleep to do the like work that happens like in dreaming. Like there's presumably other ways of just like accessing that type of consciousness and doing the work like while you're awake.
I think I spoke about this last time because I remember sitting there and talking about how, at least I learned in the Seth Dreams course, that many inventors used to just like digital alarm clock times, they would hold something metal in their hand and they dangle their hand over like their armchair armrest. And as they fall asleep, the moment that object hits the floor, they wake up because they're trying to access that like magical hypnagogic state where they're not fully asleep, but they're not fully awake either. And then like steal ideas from there, essentially, from that creative fount that all ideas come from. Framework 2.
Framework 2. It's all there.
I agree, by the way, because I have this, I don't even know what you would call it. The sleep doctors were not able to diagnose it with anything, but I fall asleep really easily to the point where my doctor was like, you might want to be tested for narcolepsy.
Oh.
But I had such like performance anxiety during my sleep study, like overnight sleep study, I might have botched it. So I don't know, maybe I have narcolepsy, maybe I don't. But like essentially, if you lay me down and I'm comfortable, I can fall asleep in minutes. And sometimes like when I'm just in bed with my partner, if we're having a conversation, if he doesn't respond in like 10 seconds, I'm just gone. And then for like the 10 seconds I'm gone, I will dream. And then when I wake up, I'll ask him, how long was I out? And he'll be like, 50 seconds. And I'll tell him about this dream that spanned like 5-10 minutes.
Whoa. So I think that's like, I would look at that as like a virtue or like a mobility of consciousness versus like.
I used to think it was a bad thing because I struggled to stay awake. But after, spoiler alert, adapting the Seth sleep schedule that he talks about in the next chapter, I've been completely fine sleeping what Seth says is the natural way. And I what used to be something that I hated about myself is now something that I'm like, oh yeah, it's really cool that you can.
Yeah.
Because Seth does say that dream reality exists always. So you can.
Yeah, like there's a part of ourselves that is conscious in that reality right now. Yes.
Your dream self is always doing stuff. And so like Robert Wagner in the Dream Course taught us, sometimes you can. I think this is loosely related to the term wild wake-induced lucid dream, where you carry your awareness into the dream, and like as you're falling asleep, you like try to retain awareness that you're about to go start dreaming. And then when you enter the dream, you ask yourself, okay, what just happened like 20 seconds ago in this dream? And you'll actually be able to recall as your dream self what was happening when you were awake. And then like you'll see everything that led up to this point, which is really interesting.
Right, yeah. Because that means that you are just really off doing all that stuff all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. But then again, when like you take the idea that everything is literally mental seriously, then it doesn't seem that far-fetched that like everything is just like a matter of focus.
Yeah, and that would be proof to yourself that you are not just one stream of consciousness. There was this other dreaming stream of consciousness that's happening the whole time.
Yeah.
So what else is there?
Right, and the fact that you can flip between the two so readily, it's like you're not one of them or the other one more. You are just kind of both of them equally and at the same time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think it relates back to this anxiety about, being alone or, having, there's actually a term for it, anxiety of influence. Have you heard that for like artists, like they're worried about like authenticity basically. But like it's just this idea that like whatever the world is, infinity is, the self is, if they're all the same thing, there's still like profound value and adventure and discovery, even if it's just your own self, even if these strange fish that are popping up are in some ways like part of our own self. Like I just don't have the anxiety of like, oh, is that at the ultimate level part of the same self? It just doesn't bother me anymore. But at the same time, it's a constant challenge to like incorporate this idea of no boundaries and also being boundaries. Like we're just focused, and like the body is one part of it that makes it even trickier, I think, because like there's a part of this focus that is very specific to this apparatus that we're using, this like, what does Seth call it? Like an image or something. He says like something after you die, you always have like, I think he uses the word image or something.
I don't remember exactly which word he said, but I know that he does not like the body being described as merely a vehicle for the soul.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because he says that your body is the physical manifestation of your soul. It's not just a thing that your soul neatly fits in.
Oh, it's just like, yeah, all of your flesh is literally just like your soul, but just like in just being physical.
Yes, because everything in physical reality is a mirror that reflects your thoughts, beliefs, and expectations.
Right.
So if your body looks a certain way, it's not coincidence, it's not just genetics.
Mm-hmm. Whereas, like, I'm looking at Michael's enormous bookshelf. If I write a book, right, the physical instantiation of the book is in some sense just the physical form of the thing that I made in the other dimension, the idea of the book,
right,
given physical shape by Michael and then put it to his bookshelf.
Right. Which would be different if you were like a really great artist and you sat down, you meticulously like took the wood pulp and you made that book and you like wrote it down physically. You know what I mean? Like one of them, getting your publisher to print it would be more akin to saying this book is a vehicle of the data that is my story.
Right.
Versus if you actually sat down and meticulously made that book from scratch.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like bringing it back to framework 2 is also helpful when you're thinking about this. Like if we're like creating this reality, it's like we're cooperating with like the publisher and the people that made the book and stuff in creating this. Like all that exists there. It exists here in a version. You know, like for me to have this one book, like that implies this like history where everything was created. And like in framework 2, that and all this other unimaginable like thickness of experience is there. And this reality is just the way that it all fits in a way that I can have that book on my bookshelf, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, we had to like have dinosaurs exist to die to make gasoline so that we could have a truck deliver it to the bookstore and all that.
But when you start going down that road, you can kind of see how like Seth says that we're like constantly like shifting our past too at the same time.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's just like however we shift the present and however our beliefs align with like how we had to get to that present, the past has to shift too. It's like the wake of a boat. You know, like if we turn it this way, you know, is that a good analogy? I can't tell if that's good or bad. You know, like the wake kind of shifts with it.
It's poetic.
I think that works a little bit. It
works. Like you and the water create ripples that go out behind and in front of you.
Yeah.
Oh, there was one paragraph I thought was quite important. I don't know what page this is on, unfortunately. But he says, at a very simple level, for example, your consciousness leaves your body often in a sleep state. You communicate with people in other levels of reality that you have known, but far beyond this, you creatively maintain and revitalize your physical image. You process daily experience, project it into what you think of as the future, choose from an infinity of probable events, those that you will make physical, and begin the mental and psychic processes that will bring them into the world of substance.
Yeah, I like that.
I think he kind of like understates it here, but he does go on to write numerous books on dreams. There's Dreams, Evolution, Value Fulfillment, Volume 1 and 2, and then there's Seth, Dreams and Projections of Consciousness. And just littered throughout all of the books he talks about dreams. But essentially here, he's touching upon the idea that in dreaming, in dreams, we essentially like try out what we want to happen, and then collectively as a planet, we decide that we pick one to mass manifest. And I think that's really interesting. After I learned that, I started to see a lot of people talking about how before COVID hit, they were having pandemic dreams. Before 9/11 hit, they were having planes hitting buildings dreams, falling out of the sky dreams, which you might attribute to some cognitive bias, like, oh, they only remember that because that happened. But personally, I have had, I don't know, and this gets into like the mystery of like, are dreams precognitive, or are you creating your reality because of your dreams? Like, are they predicting reality, or are they creating reality?
Right.
Because I've experienced a lot of people in my life, because they do Seth and they have their dream journal, tell me like, oh yeah, I dreamed this today, and they tell me that, and then it happens later, and sometimes I'm with them when it happens, and then I'm like, shoot, you dreamed this like last night. So like, you know, I know they're not scamming me, because unless they orchestrated everyone in the grocery store doing that, I know it's real. Or I've had numerous people in my life, like relatives and platonic friends, tell me that the day a relative died, they had a dream that relative came to see them, and it's one of those more vivid, just too vivid to be real, didn't seem like a dream. And then the next day, they found out that person passed overnight, and I can't even count how many times this happened.
Right, yeah. Right, and like, so if you experience that phenomenon, like you're saying, you might interpret it as like, oh, well, I'm like precognitive. I can like tell that stuff's going to happen in the future. But like the explanation might be the opposite, that like
Right.
you're taking part in making it happen because you...
And I think that's what Seth would say, right?
I think he mentioned it once in one of his books, and he said sometimes they are precognitive, sometimes they are not. And I'm like, well, how do we tell the difference? Why would you leave with a cliffhanger, guy?
But if at the ultimate level we're like choosing our own reality always, I don't know if there's much of a distinction, you know? Like, I think a lot of times those larger events, we're choosing the effects that come from them, and the larger event is kind of arbitrary to it. Like the example I'm sure I've already talked about on this podcast was just like the woman that had on her vision board just winning the lottery. And then I just like dug in like, well, why do you want money? As my kids go to school and I want them to have a good life. And like, what you really want is something else. Your limited views have given you this view of the way it should happen. But like when you're talking about co-creating in this large cooperative manner, there's a way that all needs to fit in together. And so like maybe you didn't choose like 9/11 to happen, but like you signed off on a large event that would give you, you know, the results that you needed, and everyone else did the same for their own versions of what they needed.
It all served them in some capacity,
Yeah.
creating conditions for them.
And Seth says, and this is the harder parts to accept, but that even like the people that died, they were looking for a way to die. I mean, and that's when you start thinking about like, oh yeah, well, a lot of people don't recognize that they probably want to die, but like living forever in this world might not be all it's cracked up to be. I don't know.
I'm kind of a fan.
Fan
Really?
of living?
Oh yeah, I
know.
everyone, there's such like, I feel like it's a trope at this point that people are always like, oh, living forever would be a curse. And I'm just like, well, living today is not. So like, why would living
Forever is a long time.
you grow and change as a person. By the time you're, 300 years from now, you won't even be the same person anymore.
I guess in this context, there's another level. There's another forever, like outside of the context of just this earthly life.
That I feel is less limited, so I'd be like, all right, let's go.
Yeah, you're like, I want to experience like everything all at once. So.
Yeah, even given the choice of just this world being the only reality, like I would choose like multiple lives and incarnations versus just one long one. You know,
Yeah.
I remember just like watching the Olympics, and there's like, oh, there's this black female pole vaulter from France. It's just like the combination to me, for whatever. I mean, this doesn't sound bad. It's like that's so exotic. I'm like, just the fact that you can like just have all these different experiences, all these different combinations. A lot of this chapter was making me think these things too, like these other streams of our other selves that are just nearby. Like I often feel like, I have these urges like I want to like paint or I want to study architecture. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure there's another like adjacent form of myself that's doing these things.
100%. If you thought of it that deeply, 100%.
Yeah. And then Seth always like, it's such a mindfuck that he always encourages like Jane and Rob to like dabble in those other things too. Kind of in the same sense you're talking about the video games, like your skill set from here or your skills. What did you say, from like knitting or something? You can bring that.
Yeah, knitting to cooking.
Yeah, like, but that's what Seth is saying. Like he's encouraging Jane the writer to paint and Rob the painter to write. And
yeah, that's sort of interesting that like we presumably exist as like this like group entity, and that there's sort of something essential to living the best version of your particular life that involves having these experiences from these other lives, it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, not only are you not trying to pigeonhole yourself in the current life that you're living, but you're not trying to pigeonhole yourself to the current life that you're living, like you're...
By living forever.
Yeah, I mean, presumably if I'm living forever, I've got all these other little side projects going on that are feeding into it, but
I mean, don't get me wrong, I definitely could spend several centuries in this lifetime and probably enjoy it.
I think I'm just too much of a stubborn asshole. It's just like, nah, this is good. We got a good thing going. Like, just let it keep rolling.
You just saying stubborn asshole made me go back to the Frank Watts thing, or that was and Seth implied, so that was like his last incarnation.
The fathead.
Yeah, but he implied like there was like just some like leftover things he had to like have that incarnation for. But I don't know if he ever like really got into specifics, but it made me wonder, like, what could a fathead kind of experiences did he just like gather up that he was missing from all of his other ones?
I mean, I haven't read all like 32 books or whatever, so I can't say that he never said it. I just don't remember him reading it. But
yeah,
my impression of Seth is like he's this really highly intellectual being who likes to teach and know stuff.
Yeah.
So it might have been useful for him to just live as like what he would call a stupid person, just to experience.
Yeah.
There is validity and value.
Yeah, I think I got the idea it was just like some sort of humility or something that he needed. Or
it seems like there's a lot of humor involved at that level too. The way that like Seth talks about it and the way that Jane writes about it in that other book. Like, it seems like that there's a lot of room for like just doing something as a kooky little joke, you know? And like, I sort of empathize with that, like in role playing too, right? Like I was telling you about my previous, for the listeners, we have officially finished the last D&D campaign that I'm in. So if I refer to my character from now on, it will be a different character.
That'll be the real clue that there is a long
pause. Yeah. But like in that previous character, right, I was playing like a pretty bad dude. I was playing a pretty evil guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, is that because I am that kind of person? Not entirely. But it's sometimes it's enjoyable to be like, wow, this guy's a jerk.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to experience what it's like to be a jerk, you know?
Yeah. And it's cool that there's like a safe space that you can do that. And it's kind of a head trip, but I don't think Seth would say it justifies doing anything, but like on this level, he does say like, yeah, the victim and the victimizer kind of choose each other and partner up in this reality. And I think he is very careful to say, like, that doesn't mean, we should just go around slashing people and being violent. But
the opposite. He encourages us to help.
It makes me wonder, though, like, how many of our, like, video games are just, like, shooting everyone that you possibly can. Like, what are we getting out of that? To me, it's more of, like, more than it's a reflection on, like, a vice or anything. It's just a lack of imagination. Because, like, I think from some perspective, like, we haven't figured out a more enjoyable thing to do from like that sort of like first person character. I don't know, in a video game.
I agree that it's a lack of imagination with game design. I mean, like video games are fairly nascent in a grand scheme of things, but I do not like that 10, 20 years ago, most of the video games were just very male oriented, I want to say, but not exactly. It's more about like dominating others, feeling like powerful because you don't feel powerful in real life. And I'm like, that is not why I want to play video games. I want to play video games to role play like Dollhouse, where I'm like raising a pet or like nourishing a garden, like all these like wholesome cutesy things. And I think we're seeing that now because more and more, they call them like cozy games, are coming out like now, like Stardew Valley, Animal Crossing. And it turns out everyone loves those games. Like
universally loved.
Exactly, yeah. But like, I mean, I still don't. And I have like male and female friends who don't like shooters because it's too high stress. They don't want to be dominating others. But like, that's what we had to pick from because, like I said, video games are pretty nascent now. There's not that much selection, but indie games are coming on to market.
Yeah.
And the more giant AAA layouts happen, the more I'm like, yeah, devs, go make your own indie studios.
Yeah.
We don't need another like Call of Duty Modern Warfare. We don't need another FIFA. Like, come on, let's go.
Like, sorry that your job security is a little worse, but like, hey, the creative aspect of it is going to be kind of nice.
Yeah. I personally don't think their job security is worse because I think people are pivoting. I mean, more and more people are not liking those old types of video games and craving the new ones, and they're showing that they have the money to throw at it.
I feel like it's a very similar problem or issue as like just movies too.
Yes, I was going to say
like the studio system, and they like find something that works, or the superhero movie, and will just like keep telling the same version. And related to that, I don't know if it's quite exactly the same thing, but like I think it is just a lack of imagination where like at some point, almost every movie comes down to like some sort of like physical fight. Like even if it's mostly like a normal movie, like somehow like the hero has to like have some sort of like martial arts skills to like save the world.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's just sloppy.
I think
Sloppy
it's
writing.
cheap if you have to resort to violence and sex to tell a story.
Yeah.
But I think like video games that's changing because now we have YouTube where anyone and their mother can upload content and create. You don't have to be a director running like a multi-million-dollar budget here.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a lot more like wholesome content, you know, just like daily life type videos where people are just giving money away to people who need it or just...
You don't have to go through the gatekeepers like you did before.
Yeah. And it turns out like stuff that's trending on YouTube isn't just gratuitous sex and violence.
It's cool. It's cool how the world finds a way to grow in a positive way despite obstacles. We're getting close to the end here. I'm sure we talked about this, or I feel like at some point we were like, oh, Seth covers this at some point, but he says now, initially Rupert and Joseph and I were part of the same entity or overall identity. And so symbolically speaking, there are psychic currents that unite us. All of these merge into what has often been compared to as an ocean of consciousness, a well from which actuality springs.
From which all actuality
springs. Yeah. So I feel like at some point in the previous chapters, we were like talking about this. I can't remember exactly what. I mean, he touches on this at several places, right?
He does, yeah.
And then the last part is just a little bit about the ego. Now, the ego acts as a dam to hold back other perceptions, not because it was meant to or because it is in the nature of an ego to behave in such a fashion, or even because it is a main function of an ego, but simply because you have been taught that the purpose of an ego is restrictive rather than expanding. So I like how I find this very almost exclusive to Seth, that like he doesn't completely vilify the ego or even vilify it at all, really.
No.
He's saying that it's just, you know, it's a misunderstanding basically. But so many, I mean, even if like other spiritual traditions don't bash the ego, often are like our society's interpretation of them, contemporary interpretation, is like killing the ego. Like I hear that a lot in like Buddhist meditation circles. Like we're all about non-violence except for when it comes to the ego. We're going to kill that motherfucker.
Yeah. I found it, I really liked this last like point, and I found it like surprising and like really like sort of perceptive that like the idea that like in our society, like we're taught that the ego is a very weak thing that needs to be like defended by like other processes, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like sort of the insight that like that view of the ego then leads to people's actions of then trying to protect their ego, you know?
Yeah.
Like seeing it as vulnerable and needing a defense, as instead of seeing it as like generative, you know? Where it's like, I think if you say the word ego to people, it has a negative connotation as a word.
Yeah.
Like they don't think of it as like, oh, that's like the creative font of like the things that I do as an individual and how I interact with the world. It's like my like access to like everything else is through my ego. Like that's not what they think of when you say like, oh, you've got a big ego, you know?
Right. And it's, you can see like we have this wisdom available to us. We just don't apply it in the area. Like, you know, if a child did something bad, we wouldn't say, you are bad. We would say, you did something bad, right? But we don't say that to the ego. The ego is behaving in this way, and we're like, therefore we have to...
We just throw it out with a big...
Yeah. Yeah. The ego does want to understand, interpret physical reality, and to relate to it. It wants to help you survive within physical existence. It cannot relate to a reality that you will not allow it to perceive. Can poorly help you to survive when you do not allow it to use its abilities to discover those true conditions in which it must manipulate. So yeah, that was another part of just like really appreciating Seth's take on things being different than several of the mainstream ones.
And it's very self-affirming. Like he's like the one, like you said, so many religions just put us down for what we are. They tell us we have an ego and it sucks. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I suck then. But Seth says like every part of you is valid and has a purpose.
Yeah.
You just need to fine-tune it a little bit and we're off to the races.
Yeah. And yeah, it's like I said, we really don't need to go that far to see how that's a much more helpful approach.
Yeah.
Is that a wrap? Do you want to comment on the italics there at the end?
Oh, I love the italics.
Yeah, I actually highlighted some this time.
Yeah, so that's the end of the chapter. The italics are basically Seth is going to give Jane and Robert sort of some insight into like Jane's like poetry writing and fiction writing. And Seth says that Jane's poetry was a creative offshoot of her desire to understand the nature of existence and reality, her way of probing psychically into other realms, a method of investigation and a method of exploring. And then her fiction was her way of probing possibilities of trying to understand other people. All of her writing is a part of her creative life, but now she's investigating the nature of reality more directly. And there's a great unity between the personality's main interests, right?
Yeah, it's very cool. I relate to this very deeply, And for a while there, maybe there was some anxiety of like, oh, should I be like studying reality or should I be like writing fiction? But I mean, I think he's not saying it, but implying it here. They're both two ways that are completely valid of doing similar things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, reading that was part of the reason that I wanted to pick up the fiction book and actually start chomping into it, because I was like, okay, like maybe I should try to explore this side of it since we're already sort of investigating the Jane psychology side of this thing.
I always forget about Jane's fiction whenever I'm like thinking, I want to read, a novel or something. Just because in my mind, this is all like of a certain vein. But yeah.
Well, didn't you say, I think we talked about it earlier, there was like somebody in sort of the Seth community that's been like doing some of the archiving work or something on like some of the early stuff?
Mary Dillman was working at the Yale Library, so poured through a lot of just the physical material, but she passed away a few years ago.
Yeah, it was the Yale Library, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started looking up to try to see if there was other stuff that I could get of like the really early stuff that Jane wrote. And that was one of the ones I was looking at. Like the only place I could find it accessible was like they have a physical copy at the Yale Library. You can go read it. I was like, I
wonder if they'll ever like digitize that kind of stuff.
I don't know if they're allowed to.
Yeah.
Because of Laurel Davies.
Yeah. But I mean, it's kind of a weird area for like libraries in general, the digitization age, right? Just like,
I'm just thinking of the Library of Alexandria, and I'm like, I hope to God the Yale Library is packed with asbestos.
Oh no!
Come on, we can't lose this stuff.
Right. But it's like, yeah, the purpose of the library is to be able to share it with people, but it seems kind of like,
yeah. The purpose of a library is that we live in a world where people have copyright laws, and this is the only institution we could make that publicly allows us to get around them.
Yeah.
I don't have strong feelings about libraries at all.
Well, listeners should note that Joe is newly a librarian. This is
true. Technically a professional worker of a library.
Yeah.
I was told I'm not allowed to call myself a librarian because I don't have the degree.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
They're very protective of their guild.
Yeah. I sense from what you're saying, the people that have gone to school for librarianism, they don't want you part of the club unless you pay the price.
It's all right. I know how to check books in and out. Yep. What else do you need?
Yeah. That's our show, but fear not, the never-ending conversation continues next week. If you're enjoying the show, please be so kind as to subscribe, like, rate, and review, and if you're feeling frisky, tell a friend. Contact us at implicatingthereal@gmail.com. You can support the show at patreon.com/implicatingthereal. We are doing our best, but whatever support you can lend helps us appreciably. We are not affiliated with the publishers or proprietors, but we encourage you to get the books. You can follow along as we endeavor to dive deep into the Sethian worldview, and there's really nothing like cultivating your own relationship with the material. Until next week, we wish you a fond good evening.